not all people in the same race are the same way. There's always differences. And I can attest to that myself. I come from a very racist state in South Dakota. Is I think about maybe close to 30% of the population is Native American, which means, a little over 70% is non-Native. And most of that 70-something percent are racist. That is a bona fide fact. So, and most of that 70% is Republican as well. So it doesn't matter if you vote or not. The Republicans are always going to win because of the population. That's South Dakota. Yeah. So there's the mentality against Indian people is really bad. South Dakota is always called the Mississippi of the North. Always. Yeah, there were black civil rights workers that came up to the reservations during the 1970s, and they experienced racism that was exactly the same, if not worse, than from the South and places like Mississippi, North Carolina, Florida, Virginia, those racist states. South Dakota is hanging right in there. So that's why they call South Dakota the Mississippi of the North. Most white people in South Dakota hate Indians. That is a fact. I'm not talking rhetoric. That is a fact. I mean, think about that, people. There is a town in South Dakota in the Black Hills which is considered sacred by the Lakota people. And this town is called Custer. That's like Germany changing the name of Berlin to Hitler because Hitler died here. He committed suicide here. That's never going to happen. Hopefully. You never know the future. Yeah. So why would Germany is doing its best, in living with its past, and so it never happens again. So I don't think they would, change any city to be called Hitler. Yeah. So why does South Dakota have a town called Custer? Because Custer was like Hitler to Indians. He wanted to exterminate all Indians. He boasted with the army of 20 good men he could wipe out the entire Sioux nation. It's one of the things that he said. Women and children including. So why do they have a town called Custer? See, that shows you the mentality of the people in South Dakota. Yeah. One day, I was traveling with one of my. I shouldn't say one of my. Gee, that really makes me sound like a Romeo. No, I had a girlfriend long time ago, and we were. She's not from South Dakota. She's from another state that's more enlightened, and she was non-native. I wanted to show her Bear Butte because I talked about these cultural things with her, and she was excited to see it. So we headed out that way, and then it got cloudy, and it started to drizzle, and I was like, "Oh man, this is not cool. It's getting worse." And then black smoke was coming out from the engine, so I pulled over, and I lifted up the hood, and it's like, well, the engine's not on fire, but there's oil burning, yeah. And I didn't know where it was from, and I noticed that just before the oil, before the smoke came out, I noticed that the oil, what do you call that? The oil pressure thing went drastically low, and I just was like, what's going on here? It's like, man, I just put in a couple of quarts of oil and it's already gone. So I knew there was something not good happening. I have an uncle who lives in the Black Hills, and he is a mechanic. And but we were in the middle of the interstate. I mean, just between. I mean, there wasn't any close towns. We were like, just out there on the interstate highway, and it was still daylight, but it was going to be dark pretty soon. And cars are just zooming by, and it's like, geez, my cousins just drove by. They ain't even bothered to pull in and give me a helping hand. And there were people from Cheyenne River. People were really looking, yeah, but they just drove by. Nobody stopped, and I was like, geez, and man, I'm gonna remember that. No people from my reservation, nobody was stopping to help. So I was like, golly. And so I got back into the car. I was like, okay, let's wait till it stops drizzling. I said, and then I'll try to, this was the days before cell phones, yeah. So I said, and then maybe we can, there was a town, about 7 miles back, and just have nothing to do but, that's the only choice is to somehow get back to that town and make a phone call. So we were sitting there, and here a pickup truck, a 4-wheel pickup truck pulled in behind me. I looked in the mirror and I was like, oh no, it is a white guy, yeah, white guy in a cowboy hat, and it's like, oh man, what's this guy gonna do? Because he had some gun rack in the window, and I was like, I wasn't feeling too good about this, because this is South Dakota, yeah. You look like your typical redneck, racist redneck, and I was like, oh great. So he came over, and he says, what happened? So I told him. So he took a look at the engine. He said, yeah, this looks. He said, I'm not a mechanic. He said, but I can take you someplace to call your uncle. He said. So I said, oh, that would be so great. So he said, yeah, come on in. Just lock up your car and he said, let's I'll take you back to that place back there, and you can call your uncle. I said, cool. So me and my girlfriend, we jumped in with this guy, and he took us to that place as a convenience store kind of thing, and he even paid for the call himself. Yeah, he had a calling card, and because that way I wouldn't have to call collect. Yeah, so he let me use his calling card, and he paid for the call. So I called up my uncle, and he said, okay, I'll give me about a half hour, and I'll be there. He said, I'll get my tow truck, and I'll be right there. I said, cool, thank you very much. When we were at this convenience store waiting for my uncle, this guy, he bought us coffee and donuts, and he sat with us, and he said, I'll stay with you guys until your uncle comes. He said. So I said, thank you. I said, I appreciate that. So we were just visiting about the weather and stuff like that, and then the tow truck guy came. Yeah. My auntie came, and she came in, and I said, okay, they're here now. I said, okay. He said, well, you guys have good luck. He said, and I really thanked him, and he shook our hands, and I was just blown away by the hospitality of this guy. Here was a white man that, if I were to judge a book by its cover, I could say this is a typical South Dakota racist, but I know better, and my girlfriend, she wasn't Indian either, so I know not to judge people. But in South Dakota, most likely, you're going to run into racists. Yeah, most likely you will. So we really got lucky this day, in that this guy was not a racist, and he was more than willing to help. And he did. I mean, he's a guy. He bought us sandwiches. He bought us coffee. He bought us donuts. He wanted us to be safe. Yeah, and it was snowing by that time. And so as soon as my auntie came, and he we thanked him, and he was, don't worry about it, he said. It's always good to meet people, he said. So he went along his merry way, and then my auntie took us to where my uncle was, and he was loading up the car, and I really thanked him, for helping us out, and that he even had a loaner vehicle, a vehicle that we could use to until my car was fixed. So we drove the loaner vehicle back to Rapid City, and that was that. Yeah, but see, this shows you that not all people are the same. I was standing out there. I was standing outside of my car, and you could see me. If you were driving by, you could see me. And my cousins drove by. They didn't even stop. People from my town were driving by. It was a tribal payday, yeah. And so they were driving by, and nobody bothered to stop and help. Nobody. No tribal members, no Indians bothered to stop in. They know, all Indians in South Dakota know that South Dakota is a really racist state. And here's an Indian guy standing out there, but they wouldn't stop in to help me. Nobody helped me. But a white guy did. An old white man pulled in, and he stopped and helped. He helped us out, and I will never forget that. So I know that there are good people in every skin color. Yeah, so I know that, and I will always tell this story because it is a true story. It's a beautiful story, and it shows you that not all people in the same race are good people. I mean, my cousins, they drove by, they saw me, they even slowed down. They saw me, and then they just took off. Here I am, like about 150 miles away from home. Yeah, and my cars broke down. There was black smoke coming out. They didn't even bother to pull in and help. See, you cannot tell me all Indians are good. So this is always important to remember, when you're talking about race relations, is that you're going to find good and bad people in every skin color. I say that every day because it is true. But unfortunately, the problems are there, and we have to somehow find a way to make things work for the majority. As long as there's duality, that's all you can do. Yeah, it's for the majority. You cannot satisfy everybody in duality. Only a majority. So that's what we have to shoot for. Yeah. Until we can start bringing people out of duality, this is the next best thing.